What's up everybody, Game Over Jesse here, and once again I have Macintyre Productions, RMFH Gaming, and Grand Star with me to discuss The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. If you enjoy watching discussion videos like this about Zelda, please subscribe and comment below what topics you would like us to discuss, or if you would like to join as a guest on a future discussion. But please remember to thumb up, subscribe, and comment below if you enjoy these Zelda and gaming discussions so we know to keep making them. This one will just have gameplay in the background, but most are actually video of us talking to each other. Be sure to let us know which format you prefer, and with all of that out of the way, let's continue the discussion.
Oh, one thing I wanted to ask is, do you think the Sheikah tablet will have any relevance to the Master Sword? Because the Ocarina of Time, as we know, was made of time shift stones, and the Master Sword looks to be, or at least its hilt, is probably made of that same mineral. Do you think the Sheikah tablet will be used at probably near the end of the game to fully revive the Master Sword?
That's a really, really good question. Nobody here probably has the answer unless you work at the game, but
yeah, but
okay, the Sheikah slate is in the same room as where Link was sleeping in the Resurrection Chamber. So I'm assuming whoever placed Link there, or Link placed himself there, that slate was placed there with an intent, a purpose.
Yeah.
And as you said, through the trials, he has to go through the shrine process. Then he goes about getting the Master Sword, and the Master Sword is rusted this time around, which is interesting.
I don't think that, it is like torn apart.
Yeah, like Vortex and on other Zelda theorists have also concluded that if this took place in the Dell timeline and like the flood was around, then perhaps all the water would like rust the Master Sword, and that's why it looks that way. I'm not necessarily sure if that's the case. I feel like this game has a backstory that's completely independent from the timeline in general, and like for example, like we see a bunch of Sheikah technology and things like that. So we've never seen like technology like this. We've kind of seen in Skyward Sword, but I feel like this game has a backstory completely independent from anything we've seen.
That's what that's kind of what I wanted to ask about a reboot possibility, because I noticed an interesting detail. Link might have not, like, the Link we see might have not been the only one who attempted to defeat Ganondorf in the same game we're in, because the monks, they worded it very carefully. The monks state, they talk about those who wish to defeat Ganon must prove themselves, implying that someone probably went there before, succeeded in that specific trial, and possibly failed in the others.
You know, that I was going to say something crazy. I was really thinking maybe I shouldn't say this. I had like this radical theory in my mind that links were actually created into that Resurrection Chamber.
That's what, yeah.
And then like in the beginning, you would see like the whole like bright light was that Link just coming into consciousness, as each Link was just created again and again to try to defeat Ganon. And maybe that's the case. That's a really radical line of thought, but just to get it out there.
No, it definitely
That's
makes
interesting.
sense. Because
Yeah,
it kind of goes along with what I said. There had to have been someone who came before you to beat that trial for them to speak like that.
I had the thought that this Link is the hero of time from the Downfall timeline. Now, in Ocarina of Time, we are told that the hero dies and that's what creates the Downfall timeline. But what if at the very last minute he is saved by the sages, he is put in this cryogenic sleep, Ganon or Ganondorf is locked inside Hyrule Castle, and the hero of time stays asleep until he is needed. He is then woken up and this game begins.
What if they kind of have Link in this kind of Inception thing, where every time he dies, they just resurrect him? Like, he has to go through the same trials over and over.
No more timelines.
Like, what if, I'm not sure if this, I don't know if in the stream this happened, but what happens if Link actually does die, like within the gameplay?
They have a game over screen.
Well, one thing I noticed is that the towers that appear throughout Hyrule are called the Tower of Resurrection, and when you die, you appear back on top of one of these towers.
Oh, that's actually interesting. I didn't notice that. The Tower of Resurrection. So yeah, he's literally being revived every time he dies because he's a pawn. Like,
going back to the Master Sword real quick. What if it's just rusted because it's not in its pedestal of time? I mean, you know, it's shown to be in a different location, and every other time we've seen the Master Sword, it's been in a location that's similar to the location of the Temple of Time.
Actually, I had a theory about the Master Sword that I told Zeltic about. What if it's rusted? Not necessarily because it's out of its pedestal, but because of the water. And so I explained to it like this. Okay, so Ganondorf was stabbed in the head in the Wind Waker, but the Master Sword in the Wind Waker is not the same Master Sword from Ocarina of Time. It was remade because once everything flooded, everything was gone, including the Master Sword. So whenever they had Hyrule Castle sectioned off from everything else, they had to remake some sort of area to seal Ganon's power in and seal a Master Sword. So, and the Master Sword's notably different in design. So I'm thinking that whenever the Koroks unflooded the land, there was only so much power left in the Master Sword from the Wind Waker that he just exploded with energy. And I don't think this is a physical form of Ganon either, because even Zelda, or not Zelda, the person implies in the game that this is just a curse set on Hyrule Castle. This is some breakout that happened. So I think that there was so much buildup from Demise's hatred.
One crazy thing about this game, and this could have changed since they mentioned it, but I remember an interview where Nintendo said that Ganondorf wouldn't be in this game at all. But we see a version of Ganon flying around Hyrule Castle. Is this Ganondorf's version of Ganon, or a separate version like the one seen as the boss in A Link Between Worlds?
Calamity Ganon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Calamity Ganon. It was sudden. It was a burst, and I know this has mostly been a theorist thing, but we all know that Ganondorf in the Wind Waker is not. He's not the baddest of guys. He very much resists a lot of actions that he could have taken, and it really comes down to whenever you think about it in the long run, it's kind of a basic story. The hatred builds up inside, it explodes, a curse is set on Hyrule Castle once the land is unflooded, and the real Master Sword is rusted out and decaying after a curse. It's rather simple.
Most Zelda games have two different worlds. Ocarina of Time had the past and the present. A Link Between Worlds had Hyrule and Lorule. A Link to the Past had Hyrule and the Dark World. Twilight Princess had Hyrule and the Twilight Realm. And even Skyward Sword had the Silent Realm, or whatever it was called, and the actual overworld of Hyrule. So what kind of second world experience do you think Breath of the Wild will have?
I feel like it'd be the Twilight here, simply because this is after Ocarina of Time. It'd likely be the Twilight, even though the Sheik are heavily involved above ground. It's already known that the Twilight are likely the descendants of the Sheikah. So if there was a second world, that's what I'd place my bets on.
Andy, speaking of the Sheikah, you're a huge supporter of the theory that the Sheikah and the Twilight race are related. If this game does fall after Twilight Princess, as Nintendo suggests, do you think the Twilight will make an appearance?
You know, I'm really glad you brought that up, since, we talked before, like how Nerdist quote-unquote said that Anuma said that this game takes place centuries after Twilight Princess. Like, let's entertain the thought for a moment, like, if that's actually true. There are multiple inferences that we can determine that the Twilight, at the very least, have some sort of connections with the Sheikah. Due to the Sheikah eye symbol being on the throne room and on the throne place of the Palace of Twilight, and being them also using kind of similar-esque technology, actually, with the whole blue highlights and things like that. So you could argue that the Sheikah are still alive, but they're in the Twilight realm. But they're something else at this point. If this is true, if what a Nerdist said is true, and we could somehow find the exact quote where Numa said that this takes place centuries after Twilight Princess, what happens at the end of Twilight Princess? Link goes off away from Ordon Village doing who knows what. Some theories claim that he's trying to figure out a way to get into contact with Midna again. And so, like, let's say if the Sheikah are still around, then perhaps they did come from the Twilight Realm, and perhaps they went to the whole roots again, trying to figure out what their Sheikah culture was. If they figured out a way to branch the connections between both worlds. But if that's not the case, if this game isn't in the child timeline, but rather in the adult timeline, the Sheikah we've seen in the game aren't really alive in a sense. Well, they were.
They're in stasis as well. They're very much in stasis until Link, lets them fulfill their duty.
Like, and then we have a period of time before that. Like, there's 100 years. I'm assuming prior to these 100 years, they were alive and kicking. But what happened before that? Like, does this go like even prior to that? Like, if this takes place in the adult timeline, I'm more inclined to believe this takes place far ahead of the adult timeline, like very at the end of it. But yeah,
like a sequel to Spirit Tracks or something like that, or a sequel to Wind Waker, but after Spirit Tracks.
Something like that. Yeah. There's one more thing I wanted to bring up. There is a direct quote from the Old Man saying that the Sheikah have preserved peace and stability in Hyrule constantly, which is very interesting, since the only like from the current timeline, that is the only other instances we can really think of, if you count Midna as a Sheikah,
before Skyward Sword.
Yeah, before Skyward Sword. But if you count Midna as a Sheikah, if you believe the whole notion that the Twilight are descendants of the Sheikah, technically Midna is a descendant of the Sheikah, and she did help maintain this stability.
Here's what I'm thinking. This might sound far, but okay. So we know the interlopers were basically the Sheikah, right? They were kind of like the bad guys of the Sheikah tribe.
Right.
They were banished to the Twilight Realm. So they existed. They would exist in every branch off timeline, including the adult timeline. So what I'm thinking is, once the land was unflooded, in a timeline where Twilight Princess didn't happen and the mirror was not destroyed, it's likely that they saw that Hyrule was going to crap, like utter crap, and they used their advanced technology to resurrect a hero and save it. And they were blessed.
Very interesting.
They were blessed by Hylia, which is weird because you'd think after Skyward Sword, Hylia herself wouldn't be relevant. She'd just be called Zelda. But they're blessed by the goddess Hylia to guide this hero to courage. That's.
You know, it's interesting you brought that up, since like they call her Hylia, the goddess Hylia, but that's kind of irrelevant after Skyward Sword, or at least a foreseeable time period after Skyward Sword, at least until after the Era of Chaos, which Zelda pretty much takes over from that. So where did they getting Hylia from? Like,
maybe it's Hylia calling you and not Zelda, because it's never said that she chooses to. Is it said that she chooses to make herself mortal for eternity, or just specific events? How does that work? But can she choose otherwise, being a goddess?
We all know from Skyward Sword that Hylia was reincarnated as Zelda, but I think it may be possible that if no daughter is born, and with no way of Hylia to be reincarnated, she may go back to her spirit form as Hylia. So if the bloodline only gives birth to a generation of males, she'll have no choice but to become a goddess once again.
I feel like that makes sense, but I'm not sure if that's what Nintendo's going for with this storyline. Like, okay, but here's another thing, and this kind of ties in towards a separate theory I did in the past. Okay, in the game, Breath of the Wild, we see Sheikah and their technology and all of it's very, very advanced. Hylia Wait, what?
Go on.
Hylia created the Sheikah, and she's said to be a goddess, but like, again, this is a bit more of a radical form of like kind of radical thought. But how does that make Hylia then? If Hylia created the Sheikah and the Sheikah were the goddess's guardians, and they have all this phenomenal technology, then what does that make Hylia? And again, remember Fi from the partner in Skyward Sword, she spoke pretty much like an artificial intelligence, like a computer program. Is Hylia really a goddess at all? Or all these conventions of what we call magic within the Zelda series just a fabrication of this ancient technology? I want to get your thoughts about this.
Well, she is said to be immortal before she never necessarily sacrifices her power, she just sacrifices her immortality throughout the games to live amongst the Skyloftians.
This game is supposed to have over 100 mini dungeons, with each dungeon having a rune that adds some ability to your Sheikah tablet or Sheikah slate. And the rumor also suggests that there's only 4 main dungeons in this game. So with each rune adding a new ability to the Sheikah slate, what items or weapons do you think we can actually find within the actual dungeons that'll make it stand out from the abilities you get from the runes?
That's interesting. I think it wouldn't be exactly all of them, but maybe like maybe a certain point in time throughout the game, you get to a certain progression state, and they give you the hero's tunic. But we did in, I believe, it was the E3 trailer that they actually showed at E3, the theatrical one or whatever. They showed a green tunic. It wasn't the exact hero's garb, but I mean, Link was in a green tunic.
Yeah, I think I've seen that as well. But that's an interesting theory you brought up, Jesse, since like these monks guys, they were waiting for the purpose of proving their existence towards a hero, the passing of a hero. So if, let's say, one of these, let's say Link's were to pass all these trials, then he would theoretically pass that test of becoming a hero and then thus earn the right to wear the hero's tunic. So that would make sense. And then he could probably go off and Hyrule Castle and kill Ganon and all that good jazz.
So it's somewhat of a Wind Waker again, where you're not necessarily born as the chosen hero. You have to prove yourself.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that actually. But is it a certain bloodline? Because they specifically call him Link. Like you can't name your character in this game. That's what I found most interesting about it. You're specifically Link. The voice actors all call you Link. You are Link. You are a character now, and that's.
So one of the first things that we've seen in this game from the trailer and the gameplay is that voice acting for the first time will play a major role in the game. Now, in the past we've seen characters like Midna or Fi have weird voices, but it was usually like a garbled mess. But in this game, we actually have fully spoken English. What are your thoughts on this?
It's most likely cutscenes in the narration.
Yeah, I agree.
That's what Chloe said. I think it's probably going to be reserved for main characters, like in really important ones.
I just want to say it's Cole, not Chloe.
Oh, Cole. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Cole. I'm so sorry on that.
No problem.
Wow, Chloe. I'm sorry.
So past Zelda games like Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword are notorious for their long overdue intros. And this game gives you the impression that you're being dropped in this open world. You wake up, go outside, collect your weapons, collect your outfits, and then you're on an adventure of your own. But from what I can tell from the gameplay, you still have the voice coming from the Sheikah slate telling you where to go and what to do. And apparently the old man doesn't even let you leave the Great Plateau until you finish 4 or all 7 of the shrines. So it seems like this game may actually have a long and tedious intro. But instead of being locked inside Ordon Village or Skyloft, you can still get some of that open world experience. Fighting enemies, collecting items, and finding secrets.
Yeah, I have a feeling we're playing an introduction, like a tutorial to a game without, like, actually playing a tutorial. They're doing it wisely. You start off, you have these 4 main trials that you have to go to. But it kind of plays it off as if it's your choice on which one you go to first, and that's I like that. And there's also a sense of progression as you do it. Unlike A Link Between Worlds, where everything just felt kind of easy.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Also, on a side note, how Breath of the Wild begins its gameplay is almost exactly the same how Zelda 1 first started out. You start in a field, you meet an old man, then you get a sword, and you just go off.
Except it's kind of reversed. You start off in a cave and go to a field, but in Zelda 1 you start in a field and go into a cave.
Ah, yeah.
So I thought of the possibility of a retelling of the first game. I still consider that an option, but a lot of things also point to the adult timeline still, for the most part.
Yeah, same here. Like, logically, like, just looking from all the footage we have seen, and, like, the logical conclusion would be the adult timeline. At least currently, that is. So, yeah, I would have to agree with that.
Yeah, I agree as well.
I'd like to bring up, I'd like to just reiterate my point that you brought up earlier about the dual worlds, about how most Zelda games past the first 2 at least have either had a secondary option or have taken place in an alternate world. And with Wind Waker really being the only exception, I feel like it, with this being back on regular Hyrule, the Twilight, again, I just want to restate this, although I've said it before, the Twilight would be that feasible realm. You'd have that alternate world, and with, you know, Hyrule going to crap, the Sheikah, well, now the Twilight now, they see that, and they understand that, so they're using their advanced stuff to bring back a hero.
This may or may not happen, but it has been said that Link has been sleeping for about 100 years. They may or may not bring back time travel. They can go back what happened at, like, before these 100 years and see what happened and see the world 100 years before the events of what you started out. That may or may not happen, but I think that would be kind of cool.
That would be nice to see.
On a final note, I'm really curious as to when they're going to release more info about the story, if they are, in that fact. There's been rumors whether or not it's actually going to be released on March of 2017. There have been rumors stating that they're going to push it back all the way to December or November.
It has to be. It has to be.
Oh man,
the game is finished. Miyamoto even said the game is finished. I think the final touches are voice acting. I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's gonna be March. I think we can all confirm that it's gonna be March.
Hopefully.
Yeah, it would coincide with the Twilight Princess release they just did this year. So
I do think we're gonna get a demo before that.
Also, this kind of I kind of remember this, but you think it's kind of strange how they haven't really said anything about Zelda's 30th anniversary?
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, they didn't say anything about it.
They did spend an hour talking about Zelda 1, though. That if that makes up for it.
Then again, they really haven't acknowledged it all year, so
It's not a catchy name.
Like, seriously, I'm still having difficulty saying it.
I still call it Zelda NX. Like.
Alright guys, that brings us to the end of our discussion. Remember to subscribe and comment below. Let us know which guests you would like to see us have on in the future and what topics you would like us to discuss for future videos. Also, please head on over to Macintyre Productions, RMFH Gaming, and Grand Star's page and subscribe to them as well if you enjoy Zelda content similar to the kind that you can find on my channel. And as always, thank you for watching.